Hey guys, Coffee Cranks here, welcome to my channel. Today I'll be showcasing you a new build that I made that is a Wretched Defiler Pure Spectre build. Original idea was to actually try to resurrect Syndicate operatives and bring them back from the dead. Unfortunately, it kind of failed when I went into red tiers and I realized there's just no way. So I actually checked Dominated. I'll post his channel in the description. It's a really cool dude and he showcases a lot of specters and how they work and like tries them out in Act 9 Blood Aqueducts. I found Wretched Defilers and I thought, yeah, I want to make these specters work. One big issue with Wretched Defilers, and I bet a lot of people don't play them for that reason alone, is that they create so much clutter on the screen. But they are pretty fun, and if you can live past that, then you're good to go. I honestly just wish GGG sold MTX that would make any Spectre projectile look like Syndicate operative projectiles. I would never stop playing Spectres then. I also want to mention that this build turned out to be hardcore viable, and I actually even managed to run some tier 17s on it, which was a new experience for me for sure. I never did that before. And yeah, the build is extremely tanky. If you're just normally doing normal map content, you pretty much immortal. I mean, I wouldn't say immortal, but you can run a lot of shit and not die. You can do so much stuff on this build. You can do bosses. The problem with bosses was more about the corpses on the ground than anything else, so I'll mention it later in the video. Right now, I'm actually delving and running full-time ultimatums, so ultimatums are pretty easy on this build. Anyway, let's take a look at the POB. The first thing you want to look at is the DPS of your specters. You have 8 Wretched Defilers and 1 Carnage Chieftain to provide you and your specters with frenzy charges. Unfortunately, if you're going to manage specters in your POB, you will not be able to see Wretched Defilers in this list. The reason I see them is because I actually manually added them, and I will have a section in this video explaining how to do that. The key item of this build is Wrathlord. Wrathlord gives you +1 to maximum number of specters per socketed Ghastly Eye Jewel, meaning that if you socket 4 Ghastly Eye Jewels into your helmet, you get +4 to maximum number of specters, which is a lot. You basically can get 9 specters, and that's why this build has so many specters. Keep in mind though that this mod on Wrathlord is not currently correctly parsed by POB, so if you go into calculations, you will see that active minion limit is still 5, and it should be 9. And the way I fixed it is I set in skills for Raise Spectre the count to be 8. When it comes to defenses, this build has so many defensive layers that it is absolutely 100% hardcore viable. I was able to do almost everything on this build, except maybe Maven because I don't know the fight too well and I hate the memory game. And also I wasn't able to do the fears for the reason that I'll mention next. Wretched Defilers come from tier 17 maps, where they use Detonate Dead to blow all these corpses that they summon. When raised as specters, they do not use Detonate Dead, however they will still spawn a lot of corpses. Every time you have an instanced boss fight, for example Maven, Uber Elder, Simulacrum, etc., the entire arena will be covered by dead bodies summoned by your minions, so it won't be possible to see anything on the ground. That's my main issue with Wretched Defilers, and I'm really hoping that GGG will fix it, maybe this league, maybe next league, who knows. The main defensive layer of this build comes from the combination of Aegis Aurora and Melding of the Flash. Melting of the Flash is a unique jewel that reduces your elemental res and maximum elemental res, but in return, your elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance instead. So what this means, if you for example have 90 max cold res, then you also will have 90 max fire res and 90 max lightning res. I have 86% to all maximum elemental resistances in POB, and the way I achieve this is through Eldritch Implicits, Nodes on the Tree, and also Purity of Ice linked with Empower. The second defensive layer I'm using is Spell Suppression. I have Spell Suppression capped, and this isn't easy on this build, so pay attention to the items, make sure you have all the mods to cap your Spell Suppression, and also some nodes on the tree. The third defensive layer is armor. I'm getting lots of armor from the tree and also from my gear. It's not an insane amount of armor, but it does help with physical mitigation. To make this build truly hardcore viable, you absolutely need to cap your Chaos Resistance. You can do so by using Chaos Resistance on gear, on jewels, anywhere you can get it. I wanted to mention that while this build is not fully elemental immune, you have shock immunity because of the Tempest Shield, you have freeze immunity when you grab Soul of the Brine King, and also you're getting some stun mitigation there. And also you are unaffected by Burning Ground if you grab Soul of Aberrath. It will also give you less duration of Ignite. The last but not the least defensive layer is block chance. I have block and spell block capped. You'll be able to easily cap the block chance by using some nodes on the tree and also Bone Offering in combination with the Ascendancy that makes it so that Bone Offering also affects you and not just your minions. Speaking of minions, if you go into calculations and check the show minion stats box, then it will actually show your minion stats instead of yours, and you'll be able to see that they also have a lot of max elemental resistance and also max block, which makes them super tanky. They also leeching life, and you actually leeching life from their damage as well, so you actually have a life leech, which is super important on this build. In short, don't listen to people who tell you that minion builds are squishy, because this build has been one of the tankiest builds I've ever played. For the Ascendancy tree, you want to go with Necromancer, and first you want to pick Commander of Darkness, which gives your minions damage and resistances, and also gives resistances to you. Then you want to pick Mistress of Sacrifice, which gives you and your minions block chance. Then you want to go with Mindless Aggression, which gives more life and damage to your minions. And the last one, you want to pick Bone Barrier, which makes you leech your minions' damage. It also gives your minions maximum life as extra maximum energy shield, which makes them super tanky. The tree is also pretty straightforward, just pay attention to masteries, and also if you want to drop some nodes, I would drop maybe a life and energy shield wheel, and also maybe some spell suppression chance, because being spell suppression capped is not that important on this build because it just has so many defensive layers already. You have 3 slots for normal jewels in this build, and all of them should have the stat minions deal increased damage, ideally increase maximum life, and also resistances or attributes depending on what you're missing most. Make sure to socket 4 Ghastly Eye Jewels into your helmet, otherwise you wouldn't get +4 to maximum number of specters. And make sure that each one of those jewels has minions deal additional lightning damage, +2 maximum life, some resistances or attributes depending on what you're missing, and ideally you also want the mod minions deal increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently. The reason we want that mod is because when we use Convocation, which is a minion skill, that mod will basically increase your minion's damage by a lot. Don't forget to also socket Ghastly Eye Jewel into your belt. And you can get on one of the Ghastly Eye Jewels the mod Corrupted Blood Cannot Be Inflicted on You, which is super good and basically makes you immune to corrupted blood. For the wand, you want to at least have these two, +1 to level of all spell skill gems and +1 to level of all minion skill gems, and you absolutely do want to have an open suffix so you can craft trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. And the reason we want to craft that is when we use Convocation, we can proc Desecrate, we can proc Bone Offering, and also we can proc the Curse, so that's super important to have. Ideally, you also want minions deal increased damage and some other stats for the minions, but that's not as important as these 3. Make sure that all the pieces of gear that you're buying or crafting have armor and evasion both. Armor will be important to mitigate physical damage, and evasion is important to have chance to suppress spell damage or craft chance to suppress spell damage. We're not really using evade chance, so you don't really have to worry about the values of evasion on your gear. Just make sure that it's there. On your body armor, what you want is chance to suppress spell damage, +1 to maximum number of specters, and any resistances that you can get. Do not get life mods on the body armor. This is important because if you get life or life regen on body armor, you will not be able to use the node on the tree, which gives you increased maximum life if there are no life mods on body armor. Also keep in mind that +1 to maximum number of specters is a special mod from Delph, and you cannot naturally roll it on body armor, or you cannot use essences to get it. You can only get it either buying it off trade, delving yourself, or you can maybe get a fractured maximum number of specters, and then you'll be able to craft other stats on the body armor yourself. For the gloves, you want chance to spell suppress, you want maximum life, you want some resistance, maybe chaos, maybe elemental resistance, and ideally you want an open prefix so you can craft minions deal increased damage, but that's not super important. For the boots, you want high movement speed, 30 or 35%, chance to suppress spell damage, life, and then as many resistances as you can get. I'm using Auza pricing to reserve Wrath at no cost whatsoever because normally Wrath has like 50% mana reservation, which is super expensive and makes it super hard to slot into this build, but with Auza pricing, it becomes possible. Don't forget to anoint Prismatic Skin on the amulet because it gives you +2 to maximum elemental resistances. The ring slots are very versatile and you can have whatever you prefer on them. For example, life, elemental resistances, chaos resistance, dexterity, maybe even get a bone ring if you can and you basically not struggling with resistances and attributes, and you can have minions deal increased damage on it or increased movement speed or whatever else you prefer. If you want to run Uber at Ziri or maps that have Elemental Reflect, you will need one of the rings to have 50% reduced Elemental Reflected damage taken by you and your minions, and also you would need to grab Yugal Pantheon for another 50%, and then you can cap that. Keep in mind that getting a ring with that mod is going to cost you, and also you will have to sacrifice other stats because of it. So I wouldn't really get it as a permanent ring. Just get a swap ring and use it sometimes if you want to run Uber at Ziri or Elemental Reflected maps. The belt is yet another slot to cap your resistances, so just make sure to get as many as possible, get some life on it, and also, this is important, get maximum mana. The reason you want maximum mana on your belt is because all the skills in your wand are gonna cost extremely high amount of mana, and you want at least one piece of gear to have that mana mod so that you can afford it. All the Eldritch implicits that you see on this gear come from lesser embers and lesser ichors, so this is going to be super cheap to craft, don't worry about it. If you have money to spare and you really want to go for it, you can of course craft with better embers and ichors and get even more max cold resistance, but you don't really have to do that and it's pretty expensive to do it, so just keep that in mind. Honorary mention for Unending Hunger Jewel, which makes your specters gain Soul Eater on kill, so they just become really fast and do everything with increased speed. The Green Nightmare is another cool defensive item, and it gives you a bunch of spell suppression based on how many resistant nodes you pick around it. That's why we need to slot it into that socket near the Scion starter area, because then it gives you a lot of spell suppression. For the Life Flask, make sure to get Divine Life Flask, and either you want to get reduced amount recovered and 50% of recovery applied instantly, or you want to get the one that gives you 66% reduced amount recovered, but all of the recovery is applied instantly. Also make sure to get immunity to bleeding on it. You also want to get Taste of Hate and make sure to get the max roll if possible. Physical damage from hits taken as cold damage during effect. You don't care about the second roll, just the first one because it makes you more tanky. For magic flasks, you want Granite, Quartz, and Quicksilver, and you want to get these three suffixes: increased movement speed during effect, reduced effect of curses on you during effect, and increased armor during effect. But it doesn't have to be in this specific order, so for example, Granite could have increased movement speed. Don't forget to use the crafting bench to craft used when charges reach full on Granite, Quartz, Taste of Hate, and Quicksilver flasks. For skill gems, we want to start with Desecrate, Bone Offering, and Conductivity, and all of these have to go into the wand because the craft on the wand will make them autocast. Then in the shield, you want to use Convocation, Flame Dash, and Tempest Shield. Convocation is the skill that you'd be using pretty much all the time, just to summon your specters to you, and also proc that buff on your jewels that increases their damage if you use the minion skill recently. It will also trigger your wand autocasts, so make sure to use it all the time. For your main skill gems, you want to use Raise Spectre linked with Returning Projectiles, Awaken Minion Damage, Spell Echo, Faster Casting, and Pierce. The reason I put Awaken Minion Damage here is because it's pretty cheap and it's kind of similar in price to the original gem. I didn't put Awaken Spell Echo because unfortunately the price of it is just through the roof. I think last time I checked it was like 80 divines, so yeah. If you have the money, make sure to use it. It's important not to have all 4 sockets linked in your gloves. What you need to do is to link 2 of them and then another 2 separately. The reason is, for example, if you have Purity of Ice linked together with Generosity, it will not apply to you and only apply to your minions. You don't want that. What you want is to have level 21, ideally, Purity of Ice linked together with Empower. Empower can be level 3. And then you have Wrath linked with Generosity, but that link is separate from the first link. Last but not least is the automation links. So you have automation linked with Still Skin, linked with increased duration, and linked, actually doesn't have to be linked with determination. So determination is not a trigger, it's an aura. So it's okay to have it separately from these 3, but these 3 have to be linked together. I also included the notes in this POB explaining you how you can add Wretched Defilers to your POB. You don't need to know any math behind it. The first 3 bullet points are just explaining to you why it makes sense. And then number 4, you can open the file located at this address in your Internet Explorer. And what you want to do is you want to go to the end of this file and you want to paste this code there. You want to do the same with this file and you want to paste this code there. And that's it. Just make sure that after you reopen POB and POB will prompt you to update, you see how mine says update ready. Do not click it. This is very important. If you click this, the code will be regenerated and you will lose Wretched Defiler data. So don't do that. If you want to keep the data, do not update your POB. And if you want to update your POB, make sure to back up the info somewhere and then just paste it again into the generated files. I also included information about the prices for all the items, or rather how much I paid for it. That was roughly a week ago, so it cost me a little bit over 63 divines. So it wasn't too bad, but I wouldn't call this build particularly cheap. But it's also Spectres, and I think Spectre builds generally are more expensive. So they're not the cheapest of minions, and especially now that it actually takes a lot more to get them to the same amount of damage like before all the nerfs. So yeah, it's about 60 divines. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the build guide, and if you need more information, feel free to pop by my stream. It's twitch.tv/coffeecranked. I normally stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Sometimes I will stream on other days if I have time, but sometimes I just don't have enough time. So I apologize for that, but feel free to pop by and I'll be sure to answer any questions that you have about the build or some other questions. Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm gonna take out Minotaur first because he's annoying. items.